Welcome to Root Research, where we decode science in plain language. Today we're unpacking how Satoshi Nakamoto laid out a blueprint for money you can send directly to another person online, without a bank sitting in the middle. Let's get into it. Why should you care about a 9-page money paper from the internet? Picture the last time you paid for something online and it felt weirdly fragile. Your card works, but then you hear about chargebacks, frozen accounts, random security holds, or a platform reversing a payment because somebody complained. Or you try to send money across borders and realize the fees are not small. Globally, remittances average around 6% of the amount sent. Remittance prices. Or you want to pay a tiny amount, like paying a few cents for an article or tipping a creator, and the system basically laughs at you because fees and friction make it pointless. European Central Bank. Satoshi's central observation in the publication is simple and kind of spicy. Online commerce ended up depending on trusted middlemen, and that trust creates costs, limits, and a whole "please prove you're not a scammer" vibe. And then Satoshi proposes something bold. Replace trust with cryptographic proof. Not trust the bank, but trust the math and the network rules. What's the real problem Satoshi is trying to fix? Satoshi keeps circling one nightmare word: double spending. If money is digital, what stops me from copying it like a photo? In normal banking, the bank is the referee. They keep the master spreadsheet. But Satoshi points out the cost of that model: reversals, disputes, minimum practical transaction sizes, fraud overhead, and the fact that payments can be pulled back, especially online. Satoshi's framing is basically, digital signatures can prove who authorized a payment. But signatures alone don't prove the same. Money wasn't sent twice. So the publication sets up a challenge. How do strangers agree on what happened first without a central authority? What if money worked like a public history nobody can quietly edit? Here's one of Satoshi's cleanest ideas. Make the order of transactions public and hard to rewrite. Satoshi describes an electronic coin as a chain of digital signatures. Each owner signs over the coin to the next. That's like passing a signed note that says, "I give this to the next person." But again, the catch is, how do we know someone didn't sign 2 notes to 2 people? Satoshi's answer is, everybody needs to share one agreed timeline, and we choose the timeline that required the most work to produce. That timeline becomes the public record. How does a timestamp server turn into a blockchain? Satoshi uses a simple metaphor. A timestamp server can publish a hash of data widely, like printing it in a newspaper, so the world can later verify the data existed at that time. But instead of newspapers, Satoshi proposes something more internet native. 1. Transactions get collected into a block. 2. The block gets hashed, and that hash becomes its fingerprint. 3. Each new block includes the hash of the previous block, so it forms a chain. This chaining is the no easy edits trick. If you change an old block, you change its hash. If you change its hash, the next block no longer points to it. So you'd have to redo the work for that block and everything after it. That's the backbone. Why does proof of work show up like a bouncer at the door? Satoshi borrows the basic concept of proof of work from earlier anti-spam work. Hashcash is named. The vibe is, creating a block should be expensive enough that you can't cheaply spam the system. Verifying a block should be easy so anyone can check the work fast. Satoshi describes it like find a value, a nonce, so that when you hash the block, the result begins with a required number of 0 bits. You don't need to be obsessed with the math here. Imagine a lottery where you keep scratching tickets until you get one with the right pattern. That scratching costs time and energy, but once you show the winning ticket, everyone can instantly check. Yep, that's legit. That's proof of work. Who decides what's true when everyone is yelling at once? Here comes the core social rule Satoshi bakes into the technology. The longest chain wins. More precisely, if the chain with the most accumulated proof of work is treated as the real history. So the network's logic is basically, nodes broadcast new transactions. Nodes bundle them into blocks. Nodes race to find proof of work. The first valid block gets broadcast. Everyone accepts the block only if the transactions are valid and not already spent. Then everyone builds on top of that accepted block. And if two blocks appear at the same time, Satoshi notes that a temporary fork can happen. Some nodes see one first, some see the other. The tie breaks when the next block gets found, making one chain longer, then nodes switch to the longer one. It is like, we'll go with the version of events that the most work got invested into. Why does the system need rewards? And why does Satoshi compare it to gold? Satoshi realizes something practical. Why would anyone spend electricity and time to secure this network? So the publication introduces incentives. The first transaction in each block is special. It creates new coins owned by the block creator. Transaction fees can also be added into that reward. And Satoshi makes the analogy. Miners are like gold miners, expending resources to bring new supply into circulation. Then comes a really human piece of reasoning. If you had enough power to attack the network, you might be better off playing by the rules, because attacking could destroy the value of the thing you're trying to steal. That's not perfect morality. That's game theory with a street-smart tone. How does Bitcoin avoid storing every tiny detail forever? This is where Satoshi gets clever about storage. Satoshi notes that once a transaction is buried under enough blocks, older spent transactions can be discarded to save disk space while keeping integrity via a Merkle tree structure. Only the root hash needs to remain anchored. Translation: you can prune parts of the past while still keeping a cryptographic receipt that proves the block contents were consistent. Satoshi even estimates block headers are small, around 80 bytes, and does a back-of-the-envelope estimate that storage shouldn't be a problem, based on the computing context at the time. Can normal people verify payments without running a monster computer? Satoshi anticipates the obvious concern. Do I need to be a hardcore node operator to use this? The publication describes simplified payment verification, what people later call SPV. The idea: you don't need to download everything. You can keep block headers for the longest chain. And you can request a proof that your transaction is included in a block via a Merkle branch. Satoshi also admits the trade-off. SPV is reliable while honest nodes control the network, but it's more vulnerable if an attacker overpowers the network, and businesses receiving lots of payments may prefer running full nodes. That honesty matters. It's not magic, it's engineering with threat models. How do you pay $5 without needing 5 separate coins? Satoshi points out a usability issue. Handling coins individually is awkward, like trying to pay for groceries using only 1-cent coins. So, transactions allow combining and splitting value. Multiple inputs can be combined. Outputs usually include one payment and one change back to yourself. If you've ever paid cash and got change, you already understand this. If everything is public, how can privacy exist at all? This section in the publication is famous because it's careful. Satoshi notes, traditional banking privacy comes from limiting access to information. Bitcoin can't do that because transactions are publicly announced. So Satoshi proposes a different privacy model. Use public keys as identities. Keep them unlinked to real-world identity, and use a new key pair for each transaction to reduce linkability. But Satoshi also admits linkage can still happen, especially with multi-input transactions that reveal some connections. So the privacy story is, it's not invisibility, it's pseudonymity with good hygiene. Why do people wait for confirmations before trusting a payment? This is the part that turns a confusing habit into a logical safety move. Satoshi analyzes the probability of an attacker catching up after they're behind by a certain number of blocks, and shows it drops exponentially as more blocks get added. The publication includes example results showing how quickly the attack success probability shrinks when the attacker has less hashing power than honest nodes, and the receiver waits more blocks. So when someone says, "Wait for confirmations," it's not tradition, it's a risk calculation. The deeper your transaction is buried, the harder it becomes to rewrite history. So, what changes in real life if this idea works? Now, let's connect it to stuff you've actually seen. The tiny payments problem. In the real world, micropayments are often clunky because conventional payment systems aren't well suited. Fees and processing overhead make very small payments unattractive. Satoshi's framing opens the door to thinking about money that moves like email, small or large, without needing the same old rails. The sending money home problem. For families sending money across borders, the global average cost has hovered around the several percent range in many reports. Satoshi's design is basically trying to remove the built-in need for a trusted hub, which is exactly where a lot of friction and fees live. The reversals and disputes problem. Traditional online payments often need dispute systems because reversals are possible and fraud exists. Satoshi explicitly calls out the cost of mediation and the trust model weaknesses. Bitcoin doesn't remove conflict from human life, but it changes the default from reversible by a central actor to settled by a public history secured by work. A quick hypothetical that feels painfully real. Imagine you're a high school student who's good at design. You build logos and posters for small streamers online. One day you do a rush job for a new client. Custom banner, overlay, thumbnail pack, done in a weekend. They pay you through a platform, you deliver the files, and then they file a dispute. Suddenly the payment is frozen. You're asked for proof. Screenshots, messages, more proof. And you're sitting there thinking, I literally did the work. The files exist. The buyer got them. Why am I the one on trial? Satoshi's motivation speaks directly to that kind of internet commerce anxiety. A system where payments can be hard to reverse once confirmed protects sellers from certain kinds of fraud. A public timeline of transactions aims to prevent the buyer from successfully claiming the same money went somewhere else first. Again, not magic, but you can feel the intent. Reduce the need to trust the platform as judge and jury. What's the biggest idea you should remember after all this? If you only keep one sentence from Satoshi's publication, keep this. Bitcoin is an attempt to make online payments work like cash, person to person, using cryptographic proof instead of institutional trust. The publication's main outcome is a complete conceptual pipeline. Transactions are signed and broadcast. Blocks collect transactions and get secured with proof of work. The longest proof of work chain becomes the shared history. Incentives and fees motivate honest participation. Verification can be full node or lightweight, SPV. Privacy is handled through key management, not hidden ledgers. And the security story is quantified. The deeper a transaction is buried, the less likely it is to be rewritten. Final takeaway, what did Satoshi actually prove here? Satoshi Nakamoto doesn't just hype a coin. The publication builds a practical argument that a peer-to-peer network can agree on a transaction history without a central bank. By anchoring agreement to costly proof of work and letting the most work chain define truth. And the punchline is clean. Double spending can be prevented without a trusted third party, as long as honest nodes control the majority of the computing power. Thank you to Satoshi Nakamoto for the foundations of digital money. If you like what we do at Root Research, subscribe and drop a comment. Where do you think the trust versus proof battle matters most in your life? Money, school, media, or something else?